Alright, so I have uploaded a video a few days ago targeted to Luke Smith, who wanted others to convince him to use Emacs, and this is precisely what I had in mind while recording the other video. Now, the response in the comment section and in general has been very positive, and I realized that there's a lot of things that I have omitted intentionally, mostly because the video was already way too long. So I decided to make a follow-up, a part 2, so to speak. Now this video won't be quite as long as the other one. I'm not going to go out of my way and try to make it as short as humanly possible, because I'd like to show a few things and show them in detail. Now, why am I even making this? Again, because I wanted to show off a few more nice things about Emacs, but yeah, I was short on time. Now, there's a few things that I would like to show, a few extensions, a few nifty ways that you can configure Emacs to your own liking, especially if you are going to end up using it as a window manager like I do. I would like to also talk about the Shell, which is something very special. A few things about org mode that most people don't really use or don't know about. And I would also like to show dir-ed, or directory editor, which is like the built-in file manager inside of Emacs. But most importantly, and this is going to be at the end of the video, I would like to discuss a few nifty points that make it very difficult, I guess, for Vim users to get into Emacs. There's a few differences in terminology and a few concepts that a lot of people don't really think about when they use a text editor. So first things first, I am right now at my Scratch buffer. This is where I evaluate eLisp, and this is a little bit of code that I just wrote, and I just realized that this is pointless. This should be like this. That is going to install and configure a package for me. I found a package lately that I really enjoy, and I think a lot of people should be using it. But, you know, that's for later. First things first, when you use Vim, and what you do is you open up a terminal, you enter Vim, or you type Vim and then the file name, and then Vim pops up in your terminal window and you get to edit stuff, right? And that's cool. And when you'd like to edit something as root, you have to add Pseudo in front of it, so it ends up working as well. And every time you're done using Vim, you close Vim, because it takes like no time to start up anyways, right? With Emacs, you kind of do not have this mentality. What you do with Emacs is you have Emacs open and you use finding files, which is Ctrl-X, Ctrl-F, to visit files, because that's precisely what the Emacs terminology is. Opening files is visiting them. Now here's a little issue that I ran into when I was starting out with Emacs. And this issue is, what if I would like to edit a system file, some sort of configuration file for like my package manager, or some config file for X11. And I came across a package called Pseudo edit, which lets me edit files as root from within Emacs, from within my local Emacs session ran as a normal user. Now what it does, it uses another package called tramp, which is technically used mostly to edit files remotely, because you can totally do that. If you have like an SSH connection, you can use your own Emacs to edit files on some remote server. I do not have an SSH server right now that I could show this off on, because I genuinely don't use one, but I do use it to access my localhost machine as root. And I have it bound to make it easier to use, so when I hit Super and E, I'll have this little buffer here, find file as root. Now I can go back and go to like, I'm on Antergos right now, so I have pacman-conf, and I can edit my pacman-conf without ever typing sudo or ever worrying about the password. I mean, I don't have to worry about the password because I made it not worry about passwords, right? I edited the sudo config file, but you can totally do that, and I have write access to this, right? I totally can edit this and save this, which is nifty. And just to prove it, Control X, Control S, root sudo root localhost etc pacmanconf. Very, very useful. It's really one of those things where a lot of people don't think about it. And initially, I would always open a terminal and then use nano in this terminal, or I would do something like this. Annoying and not necessary. You can totally do this from within your own Emacs. Now this is great and all, but what's next? Next is Swiper. When you look and search for stuff in your buffer, I've showcased this in the other video where you do Control S, and then you can type something in, hit enter, then cycle through the iterations of your search term in the buffer. I have found Swiper, and this is what it takes to install Swiper. So again, 3 lines of code. I wonder why it complains now. Oh, whoops, okay. I goofed here. I'm going to bind it to Control S, which is the default key for searching. I'm going to execute it, Control X, Control E. I have it installed already, so it didn't pull it. What it does is, it does something very, very nice. Let's go back to the other file so I can show you, because I actually need a file for this. etc, that's in pacmanconf. Now, when you search for something, you have seen the default behavior. With Swiper, it's a lot nicer. What you do is Control S, and you can type something you'd like to search. So, for instance, this installed here. I can do install, and it's going to highlight the occurrence of the word. It's going to make it bold, and it's going to keep these occurrences with their specific lines at the bottom buffer here. Let's look for something that occurs more than once. This might be difficult. No, let's just look for Pacman. I can use Control N and Control P to cycle through all of these, and the bottom buffer makes sure that I always know where I am and what line I would like to go to. And when I'm done, I just hit enter and boom, I'm there. Swiper is awesome. I'm going to make a full video on Swiper because there is a lot more to it than just searching for files. And honestly, this is one of those things I really like. Searching with Emacs always was a bit of a hassle. Not anymore though. Swiper takes care of this. So that's really nice. But that's just one thing. That's just a nifty little extension that I wanted to show you. Now, another thing is, and this is, I don't want this to come off as me boasting or anything, but since I use Emacs as my window manager, I occasionally have to take screenshots. I do not have like any sort of external hotkey manager to invoke like scrot or image magic directly. But I have Emacs, so I wrote functions to take screenshots. Simple as this. You can totally, it's going to, by the way, capture the entire screen, so even if you're just using Emacs, if you're not using it as a window manager, that's totally fine. But you can write Lisp functions, excuse me, and bind them inside Emacs, and it's going to just work. Just like that. Let me visit my config here real quick. And it was in, let me see, where was this? It wasn't in diminishing modes, it was probably in window manager. Yeah, there it is, screenshots. Here is a little bit of code that I wrote, and what it does, and I'm going to walk you through this just so you understand that this is not difficult to write. It's Lisp, right? Just very briefly, interactive, we already discussed this. We can call this function manually when Windows system. This function only works when using the GUI version of Emacs. Emacs, and I would like to take this opportunity to say this, Emacs is capable of running in the terminal, much like Vim or Nano or Ed, but it really shouldn't be run in the terminal. If you insist, you can do it, but you're missing out on a few things like fonts, different faces. Faces is what Emacs uses to describe a font with a color and maybe attributes, so like bold. For instance, I could have my mode line use a different font than the rest of the editor. I can totally do that. Now loop for I down from 3 to 1. That's not very difficult to see what it does. It just goes 3, 2, 1, and then says cheese. It calls this function called start process. The function's called already process will be then called screenshot. It's going to invoke import and window root. And this is the last argument that looks like a big mess. It just concatenates my home directory. So I make sure that this works on every machine. And then gives it a random name based on time, .png. It says that the screenshot's been taken, and then it binds the print key to this very function. So you can even do stuff like this. You can totally do it. Matter of fact, this is the one function. I have another one here. This one's a bit smaller, but a bit more silly. What it does is, upon pressing scroll lock, I can select the region on my screen for the screenshot to be taken from. Again, rather useful, right? I don't know what's up with my voice today. Now this may be very minor and it may not seem very significant, but what it shows is that you can very easily call external processes from Emacs. One thing you might have noticed, in the top screen here I have a function called start process, and in the bottom one I have one called call process. There's only one significant difference between the two. Start process is asynchronous and call process is synchronous, so I use the synchronous version to make sure that this function finishes before I call this one, and this one's finished before I call the other one. That's it. So again, I think that's rather useful. The next thing, I have a buffer here with a test.org file, and if you are watching this loop, you have again said that you wanted to see org mode. I am not going to be showing you org mode, lots of other people do it. However, there's a few things in org mode that I really like. One of them being tables. And I don't think a lot of people used the tables. Or well, not to their real extent. So let me just show you what this looks like. When you do the pipe symbol and then type, I don't know, let's do something like this. Right? Now let me hit enter. You can see that this has a slightly different color now. That's intended. But what happens when I do something like this, where one of the columns is a lot longer than the other? Right? Well, nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens. Unless I hit tab. In which case it will automatically indent or automatically adjust the width of the column to fit the specific length of the string that's inside. Now you can always do, where's the pipe symbol on this keyboard? Something like, Jesus Christ, I am not using the latest version of my configuration, I can already tell. Yeah, like this. So you can totally do stuff like, well, you can just do tables. Now the reason I'm showing you this is what happens when we actually export it. Well, this will happen in just a second. Let me take a sip here. And let's go over something that we have very briefly touched on in the previous video, where I have embedded Emacs Lisp into my config file. So, as already mentioned, when my Emacs launches, it grabs my config file with all the pros, with all the headings, extracts all the Emacs Lisp, and then executes it. The way you do this is, I'll just show you a shortcut. You do the lesser than S sign, then hit tab. And you can do stuff like, you need to specify what language you are going to be editing, in my case Emacs Lisp. And I can do Control C and then Control single quote. Or Control C and single quote. And I can type in anything. I'm going to type in this little bit of code. And why exactly is quite important, because other than just embedding code into org mode, which by the way also works when we where is org export dispatch here? When we export it to, like, say, Twitter Bootstrap HTML, right? And we'll wait for a short while for Firefox to open. The little bit of code is going to be actually looking like this. Now you'll see our table, something that took like no time at all, looks like this. And that's really nifty. You can do things with tables that are just constantly blowing my mind, and every time I think about it, just how powerful org mode is for tables, it blows my mind. You can like change the order of items, you can change the formatting inside of them, and the most important thing is the moment you export it, it looks like this, and it will also work if you export it to LaTeX and then compile to PDF. I tried that, it works, I can definitely attest to it. Now let's get rid of Firefox, because there's the thing that I was getting at. You can execute these lines of code and have the result in the org file. So when you are in a code block, you can hit Control-C, Control-C. Yeah. This is what I was trying to get. Control-C, Control-C. Not only did the menu bar pop up, we also got the results. Now let's take a very quick look at what this looks like when we export it, because I think it's quite nice. It doesn't. There is no result. Why is this good? Why is this useful? You see, when you are actually writing code, and I'm doing Lisp, you can totally do like Python in there, or any other interpreted language. You can have like Lua or Ruby. I don't know what you're into. But you can have snippets of code, you can execute them and have the result being displayed, and when you export it, it's going to be ignored. Which is really, really nice, because if this was a complex mathematical function, I always have the result here, and I can always keep it in mind, and I know that this evaluates to true. I know that I haven't made any mistakes. Let's say, I wrote mode bar mode, and if it was some very important presentation that I was conducting, this might be a bit embarrassing. But with this, I know that the result is true, and that what I wrote was correct. You can evaluate your code like this. The result is nothing, the results are nil. This is how Lisp works. False is nil, which is empty, which is nothing. Alright, now this aside, another thing that I wanted to show initially, and I think I even spoke about this a little bit, you use Ranger right now, right? And I used Ranger as well. Now I stopped using Ranger because there is no point to use Ranger for me. I use the built-in Direct, which is the directory editor, which is ironically used to manage files. When you do Control-XD, yes, XD, right, and select any directory, or you just hit enter, this is what you get. It looks like the output of ls-al, but it isn't. You can use N and P to go up and down, and you can totally just go to any file, like to my .spacemacs file, which I have briefly tried out on this machine. If you hit F, you just open it. Just easy as that, right? And basically you don't need to hit F, you can just hit enter as well, or even Control M, since Control M and enter is the same thing. And you can edit it, close it. This buffer remains, because this is just a regular buffer, and that's important. For when you delve deeper into this, you will find out some really nifty, really cool usages of why stuff being normal buffers is very important. You can do more than this though. You can rename things with capital R. See, easy as pie. You can hit plus to make a new directory. Just going to insert it exactly where your cursor was. You can hit capital D to delete stuff, and and you can use capital C to copy things, and you can specify. It just calls the shell command cp, right? Yes, please. And then you have copies. You can mark files. So if you, I'm not going to actually. If you mark things with hitting M, and you hit enter, it's going to open both of those. Or actually it won't. No, there's another command you have to do. I'm still figuring out the red, and I'm trying to change it. On my machine, when I hit enter, both of those are opened. So yeah, you can totally do that. That's just me being silly, not having copied the real config that I use. Then another thing is you can mark things for deletion. So for instance, I don't really like my spacemacs much. Now I need to test HTML. I'm hitting D, by the way, not capital D. Capital D will just delete where your cursor is. Hitting just D regularly will mark things for deletion, which is really, really nice. Like for instance, I'm not sure why Antergo says a .elementary directory or whatever, but I'll just keep it in there. X sessions errors, I don't need those. When you hit X now to execute your commands, it'll ask you delete 4 files. Yes, done. Easy as pie. There is one issue with the red, something that I don't like and I'm trying to figure out how to do. Let's say I go into the music directory. And I'm like, okay, there's nothing, screw this, I don't want to use the red anymore, let's kill this buffer. But this one still persists. Each and every time you enter another directory, a new buffer is opened. I'm not a big fan of this. There is a few ways you can deal with this. Honestly, I'm trying to find out the best one. The other nice feature is, this is actually an extension that I installed when I hit F8. Get this. And if you're using Vim, you might know this as NeoTree or NerdTree. Which one was the Emacs or the Vim version? Actually, just whatever, something with tree. This is TreeMax. I can use NNP to navigate. Again, very, very easy, very nice. I can hit enter to or hit tab actually, and then just go into subdirectories. This is just a little project I wrote. It has a git directory, which is important. Let's get into isec.sh, close this. When I hit F9 now, I am getting the same view, but with this one single project. It uses another package in the background called projectile that manages your projects, and if I, for instance, had a git ignore file, it would color files that I ignore another color. I can move around inside of my project. It has these little icons next to it, so that's really, really nice. And it's really cute. Some people might be into this. I try using TreeMax as much as I can, especially if I just need to switch to a file very, very briefly. I think it's perfect for it. Yeah, that's about it. You can totally substitute Ranger with something built into Emacs, and I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in the other video. There is a package called Ranger that simply emulates Ranger behavior. Actually, I haven't tried it yet. Let's do this live, boys. Let's see what this looks like. Let's evaluate this. Save file test.org. Yes, please, just stop asking. Nil. That's sad. Okay. Wow. That actually works. That's basically Ranger. Now, I say basically. Oh, say basically because it was actually just a split window. That was pretty cool. Hang on. I like this. And it uses the Vim key binding. So this is perfect if you use like evil mode. Jesus. And you can see my bash history now. Just don't mind me. This isn't the only. I'm not the only user of this virtual machine. I mean, I'm the only user on it, but I'm not the only one person using it. What the hell was he doing? Playing around with my Emacs config. Whoop, whatever. Ranger, it works. Alright, it's pretty nice. The window was overwritten, redirecting window to new frame, because what it did was it split the view, opened 3 different buffers, and linked them together, so when we kill one of them, it kills all of them, and then reversed the view to what it was before. And again, you probably figured this out by now. You can just bind it to a key if you would like to use Ranger like this. Next thing I wanted to show off is something called eShell. Let's launch it manually. Welcome to the Emacs Shell, it says. Now what exactly are you looking at? The eShell is special. The eShell is a mixture of a regular Unix shell, so something like bash, and Emacs Lisp. So when you're here, you can type ls, and it's going to work. Okay. You can use tab completion, and it's going to just interpret all these basic commands. However, what is special is if you put a command inside of parentheses. There you go, just inside this shell. And you can mix and match those two styles together. It does not, it has a path. It has a regular path variable. This is the E shell. I'm going to be blatantly honest, I don't use it very much. I have my bash shell configured rather heavily, truth being told, but I wanted to use the Emacs shell because while it is not the fastest shell, it is incredibly powerful, as you can mix Emacs style functions with just regular shell stuff. Now this might seem a bit redundant, but to me this looks incredibly useful. I really want to get into this. Now, with this out of the way, the E shell, I'm not going to bother like explaining all about the E shell because I know a few more things about it than it might seem. However, this is not the topic of the video. I'm going to be making videos on this channel on the E shell and on Emacs Lisp soon enough, but for now I would like to just briefly speak of some differences between Vim and Emacs that really, let's say they really activated my almonds when I started using Emacs, okay? First things first, some of the terminology is very strange. When you split the view, a Vim user might say, this is a new pane on my window. An Emacs user says, this is a new window on my frame. I'm not sure why the discrepancy in terminology. I'm not sure what caused this. What must have hurt Mr. Stallman to, use these words. But that's what it's called. This is a window and this is a window as well, and it's inside one Emacs frame. I'm not sure why, but this might be confusing at first. Okay, let's get rid of the window. The other thing is, let's go to the org file. Let's make a little table. That's actually important. This will be Vim, and it's going to be Emacs. In Vim, you have copying a line. No, you have, I'm sorry. See, this is me. This is me using Emacs now. You have yank, and what it says, or what it does in Emacs means copy. So when you yank something in Vim, someone using Emacs might say they copy it. In Vim, you delete, and in Emacs, you would kill. Now here comes the most distinct distinction, I guess. Something that really annoyed me. When in Vim you paste, in Emacs you yank. I'm not even sure why, and I'm not sure how to explain this, why exactly this is the case, but this is stupid. I'm not sure why. When you hit Control Y, which stands for yank, you paste stuff. Right, so when you copy this, I hit Control. Let's just call manually yank. See, it didn't copy, it pasted. That's one of the most glaring differences between some of the terminology used, other than the entire window frame stuff. So you have this. I also noticed that, yeah, actually that's correct. Like you have yanking in Vim, then that's copying in Emacs. Now the way Emacs copies is also a bit different because it actually saves to the kill ring without killing, and then they just nicknamed it copying because every other editor had copying. And see, there's a little bit of like Emacs history in there. With this out of the way, let me just very briefly speak about Vim and Emacs now, other than this little bit of difference. There is this mentality that I already touched on, where with Vim you just open and close it constantly whenever you would like to access a file. With Emacs you kind of leave it open, and then use it, or use the built-in functions like Ctrl X, Ctrl F, right, to find a file and visit it. Oh, and by the way, if you are not sure how to ever stop something from happening when you started a command and now you don't actually want to visit a file, you can always hit Control G, and it's going to just quit the command. That's really useful. You are going to be making mistakes at first. You will be hitting weird key combinations. When I started using Emacs, I would constantly hit escape. Now escape is actually a prefix, right? You can, instead of hitting like meta X, which is Alt X, you can hit escape and then X. You can totally do this. I would constantly hit escape trying to get out of quote unquote insert mode, which, you know, it's not the case. There is no insert mode in here. But, you know, that's just one thing. You are going to be making a lot of mistakes. When you make a mistake, Control G to just quit the command. Really useful. Now, with these differences, when you use Emacs, you have it open, you visit files, you kill the buffer. You don't close Emacs. There is no reason to close Emacs. I personally don't close it because it's my goddamn window manager, right? So me closing it would be slightly counterproductive. But even if you are not using it as a window manager, if it's just a regular bit of software for you, that's alright. There is a lot more than just this to the differences. Now again, I am not trying to perpetrate some sort of flame war. I like Vim. I have shilled Vim onto people for years. Most of the people I know who I have shilled it on and who actually used it still use it, and that's fine. I leave them be. I'm not trying to convince them to use Emacs. I know that Vim is good. But there is a few glaring differences in, let's say, your workflow. You might have picked up on this. As already mentioned, you leave Emacs open. You just edit files from within it. You can visit files, kill buffers. You have a lot of buffers. Oftentimes, after a few hours of work, I'm going to have like 100 buffers. And then just filter out the ones I don't need and just get rid of them. I would have some for IRC. I would have some shell running. And it's this difference that really makes it, well, wait, how can I put it best? Emacs, and when you do everything from within Emacs, it has this sort of Apple effect. Okay, I am not a big fan of Apple. And I'm pretty sure that the world would be a better place if Apple did not exist. However, what they have going on for them is this entire ecosystem, right? So when you have like an iPad and a Mac computer and an iPhone and an iPod, it all integrates nicely within each other. It interacts nicely with each other. And when you use Emacs for everything, you can have all of your workflow integrate nicely. Let me just go back to the eShell real quick so I can show you something. When I type in, let's say, ls, I can use Control N and Control F, maybe mark this, yank it in there. Like, do you understand what just happened? Try doing this in a regular terminal. Let's say if I have something like this, and maybe I would like to go, I don't know, maybe I would like to go up and to the end of the line. Oops. Copy this. See how I can even change the actual output? That's kind of nice, and I can yank it in there. Hell, I can go to my scratch buffer, yank it in here, save it for later. I can totally do that because my shell, which workspace was I on? Wait, hold up. When you do stuff like this, and this is just the eShell. I use Emacs for IRC. When I see a long message in there, I can simply go in there with my cursor and copy it. Just like this. It integrates all so well. What system clipboard? What system clipboard? I only use Emacs. Emacs has my clipboard, has my kill ring. So if you have like some obscure file name like this one, you can just copy it. Maybe you'd like some other output to be copied, maybe the output of another command. That's all cool. You can just do it. It's not difficult. It integrates all so well, and it's difficult to convey in some short video on YouTube, but when you start using Emacs, you are truly now going to notice how that works and how well stuff integrates in Emacs. It's really, really important because it's one of the key selling points of Emacs. When you use Emacs for everything, it all works so well. For instance, macros, right? You know macros. You know how to use macros. In Emacs, you hit F3 to record the macro, hit F4 to finish it, and every time you hit F4, it's going to be repeated. Unlike in Vim, where you can have multiple macros at the same time, in Emacs you have this F3, F4. Every time you make a new macro, the other one gets overwritten unless you save it. And you can easily save them and even put them in your config file, and Emacs is going to generate the code you need to put in for you automatically. I made a video on this, by the way. So if you're interested in learning how macros work, the video is titled like macros or something. Jesus, I got sick lately. So macros are important. Why am I showing you this? Because I use Emacs to manage my music library, and I had an album that had no metadata, no tags. And manually copying in the file name, or part of the file name as the title, then filling in the author, the interpret, the album name, the genre, it was annoying. The album had like 30 songs. So I made a macro that did it. And it took me like a minute to properly tag an entire album. Now sure, one might argue that with third-party software, you could achieve the same thing and achieve it much easier. With Emacs, it might not have been just as easy as if I used maybe EasyTag or PuddleTag, but I do not need this software. I can do it all from within Emacs. It really is just a difference in mentality. Most people who use Emacs, after a while of using it, they want to use it for everything. They just do. And maybe it's just me, but actually it's not just me. There's a lot of people who do it. So, a few closing words now. When you start using Emacs, and when you launch Emacs for the first time, you are going to have this beautiful little button here, Emacs tutorial. Your cursor is already on there, so if you hit enter, I highly recommend you finish this tutorial at least once. It's going to teach you the very basics of it, how to move around, how to edit stuff, how to use buffers in Windows. I can't stress this enough. Do this at least once before you actually try to configure anything. It's like everything is going to be much easier when you finish. And it's not long, it takes like a few minutes to do it tops. See, like it's easy. The other thing is, once you finish the tutorial, you want to get into configuring it and to molding it to your need. Now let me shell my own channel here for a while. You can view, or you can watch the videos I made. My videos don't really explain how to use Emacs. I just assume that you have completed the tutorial. However, they will show you how to go from blank Emacs to an actually usable Emacs. If you do not wish to watch mine, that's totally fine. I mentioned it in the other video as well. Go watch Mike Zemansky. He made like 40 videos on Emacs now, and he shows packages. That's what he does. He shows some packages that you might like, and that's cool. Having this being said, you will spend some time configuring the editor to fit your need, and you will be constantly having your mind blown by what it is capable of. You are going to be configuring it to be exactly the editor you want, and this is the other glaring difference. You might say, I use Vim. Vim is also configurable. Yeah, I can configure everything in Vim. Or I use Ranger. I can configure whatever I want. I have everything at key press. Emacs plays in a bit of a different league here. With Emacs Lisp, you can genuinely do whatever the hell you want. And it's this distinction, it's this difference that really makes Emacs shine. Is if you don't like something about it, again, you can change it. Like, I'm not a big fan of this default dir add. and I'm currently looking for nice ways to change it. And I will. There's a few packages I have seen already that can change the red. I can do it. And if I don't find anything I like, I'll write it myself. Because why not? Maybe it will be a nice little exercise. So, this pretty much concludes the second part of the video. I really wanted to do this because I feel like people really should be using Emacs. And it takes a while to get used to. I'm saying it takes a few days to get used to the new key bindings. That's it. Doesn't take longer than this. Especially if you use it like, if you go balls deep and just use it constantly, it really takes no time at all. It's not very difficult. The only difference is, you won't have to hit your escape button. And that's the last thing in this video. Do yourself the favor, and when you start using Emacs, rebind your caps lock key to act as your control key. This is incredibly important. Almost every command, every key binding by default in Emacs uses the control key. The control key will be hit with your pinky, or maybe with like your pinky knuckle. It's annoying. And most people who use Emacs use their caps lock as control. So do I. I have made my caps lock as act as control and my control act as caps lock. If you go to your favorite search engine and type in Emacs swap caps lock, the first link will be Emacs wiki, where it's going to show you exactly how to do it for pretty much every operating system out there. And it is important, do yourself the favor and do it. It will change it system-wide, but honestly, how often do you use your caps lock key? Let's be real here. You can use it as a substitute for control. It's a lot nicer, like my hands don't hurt even after using Emacs for quite literally the entire day. My pinky doesn't hurt. So there's that. Do yourself the favor and change it first things first. Then do the tutorial and then watch YouTube videos on setting up a few nifty, nice packages. And when you're done with this, look for packages, look for problems that you have with this editor and look for how to solve them. This is the mentality of an Emacs user. You find something that Emacs is not capable of and then add this functionality, be it with your own code or with another package from the package manager. Again, I highly recommend watching YouTube videos on it, because it really shows you, really shows you how to do these things. And you could read a book. I am reading a book on Emacs, and it's not as good as just watching a few vids. Alright, I hope I have convinced at least one person here. Thank you for watching. Install Emacs, use Emacs, just use good software, alright? I'll see you next time, goodbye.